Germany, a nation in ruins. 10 years after the Great War left it broken, humiliated, drowning in debts it could never repay. The Treaty of Versailles had crippled its economy. Once proud cities now housed the desperate, the starving, the hopeless. Inflation ran wild. A loaf of bread cost a wheelbarrow of cash. Men who had fought in the trenches now begged in the streets. The Weimar Republic was crumbling under the weight of its own weakness. And at its head stood an old man, Paul von Hindenburg, a name once spoken with reverence, now whispered with doubt. A war hero, yes, but a leader of a Germany that no longer existed. He believed in tradition, in the empire long lost. And yet, he sat atop a fragile democracy, one he barely understood, and even less respected. He despised the radicals gnawing at its foundations, communists, socialists, the rising nationalist zealots. But in his desperation to keep order, he made a choice that would doom millions. Because in the shadows of Germany's collapse, another name was rising, a name that would soon be spoken in fear, in reverence, in whispered disbelief. Adolf Hitler, a failed artist, a broken soldier, a man consumed by the defeat of 1918, by the humiliation of Versailles, a man who saw Germany's pain and twisted it into power.
Du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt deine Stimme ab. Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
He was no politician. He was a prophet of vengeance. His words were fire, his voice thunder. He did not just promise hope. He promised enemies, the Jews, the communists, the traitors who had stabbed Germany in the back. And the people listened. By 1932, his party, the Nazis, had become the largest in the Reichstag. But it was not enough. He did not just want influence, he wanted everything. And yet, the men in power did not fear him enough. They thought he was reckless, unstable, a madman with a gift for words. But others, deep within the German elite, whispered something else. That he could be useful, that he could be controlled, that if he was given a place in government, he would burn out like the radicals before him. And so, they turned to the aging Hindenburg, the old man who loathed the Bohemian corporal, as he called Hitler. Hindenburg swore he would never allow that man to rule Germany. But he was tired. The Republic was collapsing, and the men closest to him, his own advisors, urged him to reconsider. Bring Hitler into the government, they said. Give him a seat at the table, and we will keep him in check. And so, it happened. The unthinkable. On 30th January 1933, the war hero shook hands with the fanatic, and with the stroke of a pen, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. He did not need to seize power. It was handed to him. But Hitler, he had no intention of playing the role they had given him. Even before the ink had dried, the purge had begun. Opponents silenced, newspapers crushed. Democracy, already weak, gasped its final breath. Hitler was a chancellor with little restraint, but he wanted more. He wanted absolute rule. And then, the fire. February 27, 1933. Flames devoured the Reichstag, the symbol of German democracy. Smoke choked the night sky. The people panicked. The government panicked. And Hitler? He smiled. The fire was a gift, a perfect excuse. A communist was blamed, but the truth did not matter. Hitler demanded emergency powers. Hindenburg, his authority fading by the day, gave in. Civil liberties were erased overnight. 1 month later, the Enabling Act was passed. It was the final blow. Parliament surrendered its power. Germany was no longer a democracy. There were no more elections, no more opposition, no more obstacles. The Nazi grip tightened around the throat of a nation, and the world barely noticed. But it was not just Germany that would suffer. This was only the beginning. The world did not yet know the horror that had been unleashed, but soon it would. Across the borders, in London, in Paris, in Washington, leaders watched, uncertain. Some saw a leader who could bring stability. Some saw a necessary evil against the rise of communism. And some did not see at all. But behind closed doors, within the Reich, there were no illusions. Hitler was already planning, already imagining a world remade in his image. The Jews were already being targeted. The opposition was already disappearing. The foundations of a war greater than the last had already been laid. The world had been given a warning, and it did nothing. He knew what was coming, and soon the world would too.
Wenn es dem internationalen Finanzjudentum in und außerhalb Europas gelingen sollte, die Völker noch einmal in einen Weltkrieg zu stürzen, dann wird das Ergebnis nicht die Bolschewisierung der Erde und damit der Sieg des Judentums sein, sondern die Vernichtung der jüdischen Rasse in Europa.
History does not repeat itself. It is repeated by those who do not remember it. The question is, will we recognize the next rise before it's too late?